Belgian doubles are malty and complex with distinctive flavors and aromas. A beginner-friendly beer to make, you'll be able to whip up this delicious homebrew with ease. I'm going to show you two versions, a classic double and a batch made with sweet dark cherries, as a last cheers to one of my favorite summer flavors. Hi, I'm Trent Musho and this is the Brew Show. Let's make a Belgian double. Belgian beers are known for their unique characteristics, especially when it comes to the flavor compounds usually expressed through fermentation. They're usually described as esters, which are fruity notes, and phenols, that have a spice-forward profile. And while esters and phenols may be seen as off flavors in cleaner styles, like lagers, they fit right at home in Belgian beers, like today's brew, the Dubbel. Doubles are one of the more famed beers brewed by Trappist monks. The Dubbel originated from Westmalle Abbey in 1856, when they attempted to make a stronger version of their brown ale, and from there, it's evolved into the beer we know today. While it's hard to pick a favorite of these beers, the Dubbel has always stuck out to me. The deeper, darker, and more characterful maltiness balances nicely against those esters and phenols, and having had a few recently, I was determined to give it a try for myself. My plan is to brew up one batch and then split it into two kegs, one that I'll keep as a plain double, and the other I'll dose with some frozen cherries to play off the dark stone fruit character that is often notable in the style. So with that, let's brew. For this recipe, I'm making a 5-gallon batch using the brew in a bag method. As always, I'll have the recipe and products I use in the description box. To start, I heat up 6 gallons of water to 158 degrees. To the water, I'm adding in some water adjustments to improve the flavor. Here's the water profile I'm aiming for. Once the water is heated up, I add in the grain bag and then the grains. For that, I'm using 64% Belgian Pilsner for a clean malty base, 24% white wheat to add some nice body and complexity, 4% Special B, which is a unique specialty grain that's common in the style. It adds a touch of fruity, almost raisin-like attributes to the beer. And the last 8% is dedicated to the Candi sugar, either hard or in liquid form. Candi sugar is a must for these Belgian-style beers. It adds not only a rich caramel flavor, but it also adds color to the beer. The higher the number, the darker the color you get out of it. At the time of making this, I only had D45 available, but if you want a deeper color, go for D90. But this sugar won't be added until the end of the boil. I plan to mash at a nice middle ground of 152 degrees for 45 minutes. I just add the grains and mix it in, only turning on the heat if the temp drops too much. After 45 minutes, I pull the grains. With the bag resting on top of the wire rack, I then sparge or rinse the grains with a gallon of warm water. This will help get as much of the sugars out as we can, and it raises the total volume up to my desired level. I then bring the wort to a boil for 30 minutes. It's already smelling great. Once the boil started, I add 1.5 ounces of Willamette hops for roughly 26 IBUs. To me, Willamette adds a faint herbal and spicy quality that will pair nicely with this double. Which of the Trappist beers is your favorite? Comment below so we can see which beer reigns supreme. At the 15-minute mark, I add a Wolflock tablet for clarity and a wort chiller. Then at the end of the timer, I turn off the heat and add in the final ingredient, the Candi sugar. Adding it now does two things. Since the heat is off, it won't scorch and taste burnt, and it will also easily dissolve since things are still warm. But if you want, you can always add it earlier in the boil. That lets some of the sugars caramelize more for a deeper, intense flavor addition. This probably would have been a good idea for me since I'm using D45, but there's always next time. Anyway, once it's all in and fully dissolved, I turn on the wort chiller and take an original gravity reading, for which I got 1.066. And once the wort is cooled down to about 67 degrees, I transfer into a fermenter. For the yeast, I decided on WLP 530 Abbey ale yeast. This is a great ale yeast for a range of Belgian beers, and it has a good amount of ester and phenol production that's expected for this style of beer. I made a yeast starter the day before since the OG is a little higher, and then just pitched it in. The goal is to ferment this around 69 degrees for 7 to 10 days. Another reason why I love Belgian beers so much is that they're great beginner brews. You don't need to worry too much about temp control, but just don't let it get crazy high. Try to keep it below 72 degrees if you can. With the yeast in, I just set my fermenter in a cool dark place and wait for the magic to happen. And wow, was there magic. This puppy was firing off after 12 hours, so I quickly changed out the airlock for a blow-off tube. I could see this was going to be an active fermentation. After 10 days total, The blow-off activity had slowed down. You can see some signs of the strong fermentation around the rim. So I took a final gravity reading and got 1.010, meaning this one comes in at about 7.4%. We officially have beer. Now let's talk about splitting this up. As mentioned, I wanted to add some cherry flavor to half of this. I've done this before, and I love the way it lifts up those plum stone fruit esters. But sometimes I like beer flavored beer, so it's nice to have some options. The steps are pretty simple. In one keg, I'll add the beer, and in the other, I'll add a pound of frozen black cherries. For the fruited version, I'll add the cherries into a sanitized mesh bag, and then add it to the keg. Purging it with CO2 before filling it up. For the regular, I just do a simple transfer of the rest of the beer into a CO2 purged keg. Finally, I'll add about 10 psi of pressure to each keg and set them in the fridge. And after 1 week, these beers were ready to drink. And here's the final beer. And immediately when I look at them, there is a slight difference. The cherry one has much more of a red hue to it, whereas the regular double version has more of a caramel color to it. What I'll say though immediately is that they are not the typical double color. Usually a double is a deeper color with a slight red hue, and I would just associate that to the Candi sugar I used. I used D45, where usually you would use something like a D90 or higher. So if you're to do this again, I would say aim for something more like D90 to get that color just right. Now let's check out the aroma. The cherry one definitely has a strong cherry aroma, as you might expect, whereas the double version is much more in the vein of like raisins, almost like raisin bread. But now let's finally take a sip and see how they compare. Wow, they are both delicious. Despite their looks, they both taste like doubles. The interesting thing is that the cherry one definitely takes on more of that stone fruit character, and it really puts that to the forefront, whereas the non-cherry version is much more leaning on those esters and the yeast. It has much more of a bread-like character. I would say the cherry version almost has a rounded, smoother taste and mouthfeel, whereas the regular double version has much more sharper bitterness and flavor, but I still enjoy it a lot. They're both very great. If I had to choose a favorite between the two, I think I would lean more towards the cherry version. It really feels like a more complete beer. The cherry adds a second level to that fruity character, and it kind of also mellows out the phenols so they're not so sharp on my tongue, but they really are both great, and I think this was a great experiment. I think anybody looking to add a second flavor into their beer or try something different, whether it's the way you brew or an ingredient you add, I think splitting a batch like this is a great thing to do. I would recommend anybody trying this out. I hope this video inspires you to make your own Belgian Dubbel, and if you do, let me know. Cheers and happy brewing.